From MTN News, this is Montana This Morning.
I'm Jonathan Amberian in Helena. Next week, Montana's minimum wage is going to go up by 35 cents an hour. I'll have a closer look at what impact that could have on workers and on businesses.
I'm Joe St. George in Washington. 2024, yes, will certainly be about the race for the White House, but other political stories and headlines are expected to happen too. We'll share with you the 4 big political stories you'll want to watch. That's next.
Plus, we're looking ahead to the gubernatorial race and a challenger banking on higher property taxes for a win.
Mountain lions roam all over Montana, but they're hard to find, though they may be seeing you without you realizing it. This week, we're going to talk to Fish, Wildlife and Parks about their 5-year ongoing study of Montana's mountain lions, this winter taking place in the Gallatin.
You can bet that Chet was not very deep in the woods right there.
You never
He's
know.
always got a swivel on his shoulders.
He absolutely does. He's always got to be prepared.
He's ready.
You never know when a mountain lion's going to approach you. Alrighty, good morning and Happy New Year, everybody. Yeah. We made it to 2024. Matt, how are you doing this morning?
Good. Yeah, I didn't stay up super late. I was with the kids watching the ball drop on the East Coast.
Yep.
So about 10:02, I was in bed and asleep.
It's kind of the beauty of not being on the East Coast. You can celebrate from afar, then go to bed.
And honestly, it was a beautiful day yesterday. A little bit of fireworks in some respects, but we can deal with that. Temperatures this morning a little chilly, frosty for the first part of the day. The afternoon should bring us a few clouds. We're already starting to see that develop now. I don't expect to see overcast necessarily until late in the afternoon. Even at that, I think it's just kind of selective as we're going into the mid part of the day. Temperatures warming into the 30s. We'll talk about the impacts that we'll have as we get later in the week, including some snow chances. That's coming up in just a few minutes.
All right, thank you very much, Matt. Well, since 2006, Montana's minimum wage has been automatically increased to account for inflation after voters approved a ballot measure, adding a cost of living adjustment. And the latest yearly increase is set to take effect today. MTN senior political reporter Jonathan Amberian has more on the change and the impact it's going to have on workers and on businesses.
Monday is the first day of 2024 and also the first day that Montana's minimum wage will be higher than $10 an hour. On January 1st, the minimum wage will rise 35 cents, from $9.95 an hour to $10.30 an hour. It's a smaller increase than the 75 cents at the start of 2023 and the 45 cents in 2022, but higher than any other single year since 2009. Todd O'Hare, president and CEO of the Montana Chamber of Commerce, says there may be a limit on how many workers see an immediate change because of this. Many Montana businesses have raised their entry-level salaries well above the minimum wage to try to attract workers. O'Hare said it's likely most of the minimum wage jobs getting a raise next week will be for workers in restaurants and others who receive tips.
With the shortage that we've seen in our workforce, a lot of businesses have been forced to pay above and beyond on the minimum wage. And so when you think about the waiters and the servers in restaurants and stuff, they're the ones that are going to be seeing probably the largest sort of increase in their income as a result of this minimum wage increase.
O'Hare said the chamber sees an automatic increase as less than ideal for businesses because it doesn't take real-time economic considerations into account. He says this increase will be one of a number of inflationary factors businesses are dealing with.
Businesses are reluctant to raise prices because they want to remain competitive. But this is going to be a pinch point that I think you'll start to see flowing through the business into the consumer early in 2024 as they have to accommodate this increased cost of doing business.
But advocates say the increase could make a big difference for some Montanans who are struggling with rising costs for things like food, childcare, and housing. The Montana Budget and Policy Center put together a housing affordability map that found, based on this year's data, minimum wage workers in places across Montana would need to work at least 60 hours a week to afford a 2-bedroom home at fair market rent, and as much as 90 hours a week in Gallatin County. Montana has increased the minimum wage to account for inflation every year since 2016, and all but 2 years since 2007. In Helena, Jonathan Amberian, MTN News.
And 2024 will be a pivotal election year for our nation. And here in Montana, several big races, including the race for governor. And shaping up to be a political issue influencing this race is the recent increase to Montanans' property taxes. So much so that one candidate seeking election is making it a key issue. MTN's Jackie Coffin takes a closer look.
When Ryan Busse launched his campaign for governor, he did so with a video meant to send a message.
Gianforte's 20% property tax hike. Oh yeah. Throw it.
Busse grew up on a farm in Kansas, but has lived in Montana for 30 years, building a home and a business in Kalispell.
We love the Flathead. We love Montana. I worked in the firearms industry for almost a little over 25 years, I guess. So I was a firearms executive.
Busse eventually became disillusioned with the firearms industry. He has not run for public office before, but sees now is the time to step into the ring.
And I don't like the way the state is being turned into this place where we hate each other. It seems to me a lot of the last legislative session and the governor's sort of agenda is to make Montanans hate each other, and that's not the state that I love, and I don't think it's the state that most Montanans want to live in.
One area he wants to distinguish himself early is property taxes.
This tax increase, it didn't make things better, it made things way worse.
Taking shots at Governor Greg Gianforte in the 2023 legislature, Busse says he would prioritize readjusting the tax rate.
Just like past governors and past legislatures have done, and take back the tax breaks that we've given great big corporations like Northwestern Energy, which, by the way, had a $186 million profit and pays their CEO $3.4 million. I don't think we need to be giving them a tax break while we're increasing taxes on homeowners.
Busse and his family are also making waves when it comes to climate change. His two sons were among 16 young plaintiffs in a high-profile lawsuit that accused state agencies of violating a constitutional right to a clean and healthy environment. All issues setting the stage for a fast-paced governor's race in 2024, as only time will tell whether Busse will have both the cash and clout to unseat Governor Greg Gianforte.
I think it's time that somebody stand up to reframe Montana politics is really in keeping with the sort of live and let live wonderful Montana that so many of us have come to love.
In Billings, Jackie Coffin, MTN News.
And MTN reached out to Governor Gianforte several times to also talk about property taxes in regard to this story, but he has so far declined an interview. And the new year means new state laws, and it also means we are officially in an election year. And while everyone knows that the Iowa caucuses and New Hampshire primary will dominate politics in the next month, and the presidential race will dominate much of the year, what are the biggest political stories to watch other than those events that are happening in just a few weeks? Well, our Joe St. George with your 2024 political preview.
Well, it's finally here. It's an election year. And while the race for the White House will certainly dominate a lot of headlines throughout the year on newscasts like this, it won't be the only political story taking place. Here are the big four political stories you'll want to watch in 2024. Big political event number one, a possible government shutdown. Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson and Democratic Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer only have until January 19th to avoid a partial government shutdown. That's because funding for about 20% of the government, including some veterans assistance programs, is set to run out then. On February 2nd, the entire government could shut down unless there is a deal. To make matters even more complicated, Congress isn't expected to return until January 8th. Big political event number two, the Trump trials. Former President Trump could face a criminal trial 4 times in 2024, or he could successfully delay many or all of them. On March 4th, his January 6th trial was set to begin, but recent appeals have for the moment delayed that. On March 25th, his Manhattan criminal fraud case involving his business is set to happen. On May 20th in Florida, the case of classified documents is scheduled. And on August 5th, it's possible a televised trial will happen in Georgia related to possible election interference. Big event number 3, Supreme Court rulings. Much of the Trump legal calendar is in doubt because the Supreme Court is expected to rule on related appeals. How they decide could impact not just if some of the trials happen on time, but also if some charges occur at all. Other than Trump, the Supreme Court will also rule on abortion again and whether states can ban a commonly used abortion pill. Big event number 4, the 2024 election and the many questions that exist. We can't do a preview story without some mention of how 2024 will be defined by elections, including the Iowa caucuses in a few weeks. One question is, will former President Trump secure the Republican nomination soon, or will a challenger of his surge, creating competition? So far, the polls have Trump up by a wide margin. We also don't know if the Republican and Democratic nominees will actually debate this fall after the Republican National Committee pulled out of the Commission on Presidential Debates. One thing we do know, Republicans will gather in Milwaukee for their convention in July. The Democratic convention will be in Chicago in August. Joe St. George, Scripps News, Washington.
And Montana has a mountain lion population spread out across most of the state. And because these big cats are so elusive, studying them takes some time and some help. This week in Fish and Wildlife, MTN's Chet Lehman talks with FWP about its ongoing mountain lion study, continuing this winter in the Gallatins.
If you've spent any time in Montana's backcountry, you've probably been near a mountain lion. They're elusive, far roaming, and often hard to find. This winter, the Montana Department of Fish, Wildlife, and Parks continuing a 5-year effort to study mountain lion populations, this year in the Gallatins, with a little help from experienced houndsmen.
Fish, Wildlife, and Parks working closely with experienced houndsmen to go out and use hounds to tree mountain lions. Then they use darts to capture a genetic sample of those lions. And we use that genetic sample along with genetic samples that we've taken from hunter-harvested lions over many years to put together a more accurate picture of what these populations are like, how they're doing, what their numbers are, what their distribution is.
This is an example of another of those important partnerships FWP has with members of the community. For a study like this, it simply couldn't happen without a little help.
It's not like we can get in an airplane and go and count them like we do for elk, where they're all congregated, down at lower elevations this time of year. Mountain lions are very dispersed, they're very elusive, and that makes things a little more challenging when we're trying to survey them. So joining partners such as houndsmen to be able to accomplish this is absolutely essential. And ultimately what the goal is to help us better understand how those populations are doing, and how can we strike a balance with having healthy mountain lion populations, as well as conflicts and other needs that do occur around the state with having predators on the landscape. So it's a very, very dynamic management need, and research is essential to that process.
FWP will be out in the Gallatins with the experienced houndsmen until late spring. That effort, by the way, runs in conjunction with the winter mountain lion season that wraps up on April 14th. This week in the Gallatins, Chet Lehman, MTN News.
Alrighty, it is 6:43. Now we're going to take a short break here at Montana This Morning, but when we come back, a new year means new resolutions. So if you decide to head to the gym, we have some tips so you don't sign up for something that you may not need.
I'm John Matteries with some great ways to get in shape for the new year without busting the budget and avoiding those long-term contracts. That story coming up.